Hey everyone, welcome to another Endurance Nation interview. This is a series that we do across the industry as we cover different sports, different approaches to training. And our guest today brings a different perspective to the table. I've known Eric for a long time now. We're so old now, man. We're the old people. But Eric goes way back, and he's a phenomenal individual athlete. But what sets him apart, I think, also is his mental approach to how he structures his training. Making the most of not only what he does with his own athletes, but what he does with himself personally. Having competed against him, it's not a good place to be because he's got all the tools at his disposal, which is not good. I definitely like to handicap my competition as much as possible. So all of that said, Eric, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. No, thanks for reaching out. I know you'd heard that Minimum Effective Dose podcast, which kind of sparked a conversation. So I'm looking forward to diving into that today. Before we dive into it, though, just real fast, can you tell folks a little bit about you and where they can find you on the web?
My website is ekendurancecoaching.com, and mostly on Instagram, which is ekendurance is the handle. And I live in Boulder. I live a little outside of Boulder in the mountains, actually, which is fantastic. I've been coaching since 1999. Started coaching in rowing, actually, and coached a lot of cyclists, a lot of multi-sport athletes. I've actually been able to work with a few climbers, which has been really interesting, both in the kind of fitness realm, going to the Himalayas for a month, and even in a more technical atmosphere as well, which was really interesting. And so that's been a lot of fun, and still consulting with some rowers and working with teams and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've definitely been super creative in terms of how you can strategically reach out to different groups. And I'm sure being in Boulder, there's an intersection of, athletes and interests, right? Like in my neighborhood, if someone wants to run a half marathon, that's a big deal. I'm assuming in Boulder, someone's got to I'm going to run around the United States twice. And then people are like, all right, maybe I'll talk to you.
Yeah. Half marathons are like Wednesday afternoon here.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Lots of trail running and lots of that kind of stuff. It's pretty
That's
wild.
awesome. You made the move out to Boulder pretty early too, right? You've been out there for a long time now.
Yeah, 2006. 2006 was when I came.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which was right at the very beginning of the Endurance Nation days.
That's right.
First started. Yeah. And so
that's right. That was literally when we started.
Yeah. I remember I wasn't out here for very long, and you had that phone call. I remember talking to me and some other people about it. So
Right.
Yeah, it's been wild. It's been great. Super fortunate to live where I live now, and it's wild. I love it.
Awesome. Very cool. Thanks for the background, and hopefully folks will come check you out afterwards after we do this conversation. Like I said, that great intersection of the personal attention and for me, the strategic stuff. You remember you were, when we were talking about training athletes for Hawaii, you were like, what if the athlete did this for the first 7, and I was like, oh man, I gotta go open my laptop and start having this conversation. I can't do it off the top of my head. Which is awesome. I mean, your athletes definitely benefit from that. So, all right. So I did a podcast video a couple of weeks ago talking about minimum effective dose. The idea being, for age group athletes who are struggling to be, competitive at whatever level they've set as an endurance athlete, that don't have the schedule, the time, the bandwidth. Even now, many people working from home, there's still just so much going on. They don't have the opportunity to, put in the 4 or 5 hours a day. I was looking at some of the stats that just came out, year-end stats. Strava does its thing. They talked about some of the pro cyclists, right? Who was it? The female pro, Van Vleuten, I think her name is, or something. And she had done just as many hours. She averaged like 3.5 to 4 hours a day on the bike all year, which is commensurate with some of the elite men. No, hell no. First of all, I wouldn't want to do that. But second of all, like, oh my God, that's so far from the reality that most of us live in. But we want to compete at a high level, want to be at those events. So the idea of minimum effective dose was, what can you do during certain times of the year or in certain disciplines to achieve competence so that when you need to be better at it, you're starting from a better starting point, or maybe depending on what your skill set is, or just your physical background in terms of training and so on, what can you leverage to reduce training in one area and focus it on some other area you need to be on, right? And so you reached out to me because you wanted to talk a little bit about how that fits from your approach specific to swimming, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think it's a big topic with a lot of multi-sport athletes, especially the amateur long course, athletes and half to full Ironman, because, that swim is just a time suck, right? It's hours and hours and hours for like another minute on your race, which is just nothing.
Right.
And I think people shy away from it a lot because they're not good at it and they don't like it, and so they just don't do it enough. And it's you've had success, and I've done this a couple of times with a few different athletes as well, where you just don't have them swim in the winter at all.
Right.
You're like, look, and I had this guy that good friend of mine that I coached for Lake Placid one year, and I wrote an article about it because he averaged like 6.5 hours of training a week from January to the race.
Wow.
Okay. And he was one of those people where he just didn't have enough time to train. And he's like, I can get to the pool like once in the winter. And I'm like, forget it. Don't even bother. And he's, he's an okay swimmer. So I was like, we're not going to worry about this. He did more in the summer. But I have had kind of a lot of success, despite a lot of flack from other coaches and athletes over the years, with having athletes swim twice a week, no more. And I've had a lot of people improve their swim, and more importantly, we open up more time and more energy for the bike and the run and recovery and other things that need to be done. So, I mean, that started basically. I haven't been coaching swimming for that long. I started coaching swimming in 2013, and I'd only been competitively swimming for a couple of years, just in triathlon. And I had this idea, totally just a concept of swimming twice a week, and it's going to work, and there's going to be all these long course athletes, and it's going to be genius. And it was pretty, because I had done it with myself successfully.
Right.
In 2011, in particularly when I was running scared from you at Lake Placid, but here I am. I just started coaching swimming, and I was very confident. And 2014 rolled in, and it's January, and they had just announced Ironman Boulder for the first year of that. 14. And 2 weeks after they announced that, I had 9 local athletes all doing the race, and all sitting in the pool staring at me one morning like, you said this was going to work, let's go. And I had a complete panic attack. There's all these people, and all of a sudden my concept didn't seem so great anymore. And I was very unsure if it was going to work, but it did over the years. It's been ebbed and flowed a little bit, and and there's every athlete's different, right? People need different things at different times. But it's been really effective, not only in developing the swim, but also, like I said, opening up time for the other more important things that we need to work on.
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So when you say, twice a week, so you're looking like, if you had someone for 52 weeks, you're like, it's 2 times a week, obviously, except when you're, recovering after race, you're just going 2 times. Is that right?
Yeah. It's twice a week, and it's all year round. And one of the arguments, I think, for swimming during the winter time, especially if you live in a place like we do, where there's winter, is the swim is a atmosphere controlled thing. It doesn't matter if it's snowing or windy or icy out or what, so is being indoors. Some people don't like being indoors that much. Like me, I can't stand riding the trainer or running on treadmill. And so it's very available to do. And in the wintertime, especially with remote athletes,
Hmm.
you know, we like to kind of work with the weather. So when the weather is bad and you can't get outside, it's like, well, let's go swimming, and we'll wait a couple days
Hmm.
till you can go outside,
Right.
and so it's kind of an atmosphere controlled thing. But yeah, it's all year round. And swimmers will tell you this: you've got to swim
Hmm.
consistently because you lose the feel. And
Right.
I think that neuromuscular kind of connection, and that feel for the water does
Hmm.
go away quick. I think it comes back quick if
Right.
you've been in the pool, if you've been swimming consistently for a while. But
Mm.
um, yeah, and we talk about this, and I've heard you talk about this, where it's like, you don't need to make these huge gains, right? We need to make little incremental fractions of percent gains
Hmm.
every day, every week, every month for years. And that's how
Hmm.
you get really, really good. And so
Right.
kind of that concept of, we just need to keep kind of working on this consistent
Hmm.
over and over and over again. So,
Hmm. Uh,
um,
okay. Well, I love two things I like there. One is I love the concept of the swim as the bad weather uh, block, right? Like, hey, it's tomorrow's gonna be crappy, then we just take that run off the table and we'll put the pool in instead. So you're right. Like folks are atmospherically safe, right? And they can easily be like, yes, I can make that work.
yep.
And the other piece too, I think is important with your approach is when you say it's twice a week for a year, people can budget that, right? They can say, oh, this is the schedule. These are the days I can make these things. I can make this happen. They can set it and now they can move on. I think that's a huge part of creating success for age group athletes is giving them something that they can manage on their own. So they're not dealing with, when I see coaches or plans that have like, every week is different. Like, no, this week we don't swim at all. We're doing, CrossFit, but next week we're bowling, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, like
Yeah.
it's what a nightmare.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's way too much, too much. So how do you, when you think about like the progression of a year, like say you've got like winter training and then your spring and then race, what evolves with the workouts? How do things change for you?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mm.
Um, I mean, the way I evolve things is I
Mhm.
used to be very focused on what energy system are we training, right?
Okay.
So, if you think about bike training or run training, you don't do threshold intervals and then sprints and then VO2 intervals in the same workout, right? You
Hmm.
kind of focus in on one energy system. And I would do
Okay.
that a lot. And I've actually moved away from that.
Okay.
And so I do have kind of a periodization idea of um, working more. So you're always working on the stroke. You're always
Mhm.
trying to have a better swim stroke because that's how you go faster.
Right.
And I talk about this all the time, like has nothing to do with your 10 by 100 with 3 seconds rest.
Right.
Okay, those are just complete BS. It's getting a better stroke and then maintaining it. Okay,
Hmm.
so like one of these keys, I think, to why the 2 swims a week works is it's got to be coached.
Hmm.
Have to be coached at some consistent interval. Hopefully, it's all the time.
Hmm.
Um, so masters classes are way more fun. You have a coach, and you get taken out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, the whole thing.
Okay.
So, but uh, I have kind of an endurance effect, almost
Hmm.
not effect, but kind of focus.
Hmm.
And the way I work on more endurance is I give longer sets at
Okay.
once. So not necessarily 500-meter intervals, but I'll give people a set that's, once they've worked up to it,
Hmm.
that's 2,000 yards that they're
Okay.
going to kind of roll through. And there's rest intervals in there, but I give it to them all at once. Whereas when we're kind of working on more speed and power, it's more of there's an 800-meter set and then you stop.
Hmm.
And then we reset and then we do a 600-yard set and then stop and then, and do
Okay.
shorter sets before I stop and talk to people kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, that has seemed to work pretty well for building different areas. It's more of how the set
Okay.
is structured.
I
Um,
see.
and then doing specific kind of open water work. A
Mm.
lot of times, I think one of the questions that people have is like, how do you put this good pool swimming now into open water, because there's a lot of people, and I've coached them before, they're phenomenal open water swimmers, or they're phenomenal pool swimmers, and they suck in open water.
Yeah.
And so one of the basic concept of kind of the way I coach swimming is you want to set up your stroke and then apply stress to it. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that.
Okay.
You can try to maintain that stroke pace, stroke count for longer intervals. You can go faster, or you can do things like sighting and add contact and make people do, turn without using the wall, things like that. And so we add in those kind of specific elements like sighting and swimming 3 or 4 people wide in a lane, going in direction, to add those stress elements, whether they're physical or mental, while having this concept of you have to maintain your stroke. Like at the end of the day, like you have to get back into having a good technical sound stroke and body position if you want to go fast in open water, period. So so that's kind of a periodization thing, but essentially, I mean, really, back to this like incremental like gains all the time is it's really just about improving someone's stroke and doing it over and over and over and over again. Right. And so sometimes I get away from any specific like what I had planned. So it's and I think a lot of people also tend to rush the warm up. You see a lot of this like warm up for 400 yards and then do your main set. Right. And the warm up is the most important thing. And I coach a kind of an open master's class, and then I also coach a class that's just my athletes here. And I noticed a few years ago, that when I paid attention more to the warm up and thought about it more, and like thought about making this little progression of drills and whatever, the whole pool seemed to swim better. And I was like, and then there are days I get there and I'm just like, kick, drill, swim, blah, 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 descend. And then I want to do the main set. And we get halfway through the main set and I would stop everyone because everyone is swimming like garbage. Right. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, and, but the times that I really take the time to do the warm up and make sure people are doing it right and we're resting enough. Triathletes also don't like taking more than 5 seconds rest. Gotta chill out, guys. Like just, so, when people do that, when I've done that as a coach, everything goes better. Right? So and when you talk about that setup and then stress, right, that big picture of it is the warm up and then the main set. Right. And then what I like to do is within the main set is, you apply that stress and then you break down a little bit and then you stop and then you reset. So you do an easy something, you do a drill swim, and then you get back into the hard kind of stress set again, and then you repeat that again. And so, and I've seen other coaches do this. And so I've been super fortunate while I've been coaching swimming for a really short amount of time. I've been really fortunate to have worked with some great swimming coaches and swimming coaches who have shared ideas and knowledge and taught me a lot. So it's so that's been fantastic. And I've seen people do that where it's like 75's fast and then 50's faster and then 25's even faster. And you're like, oh my God. And then they stop and then you get like an easy something. Right. You get 2 100s easy on 2 minutes. Right. And then you do that fast set again and you're like, wow, I did it again. And then you get another easy something. Now we're going to do a couple 50s that are easy. And then we're going to get back. And then, and you end up doing like 2,000 yards of swimming that's paced at a 400 or 500 pace. And it was good. You actually swam well, So, so I like to employ that concept a lot. That's
awesome. I think
set up stress.
I told, so if I could touch on 2 things there. So one, for sure, the warm up can't get enough of it. And I would say that I think one of the value adds of your approach too is that for me, I think the warm up is almost part ritual as well. Like I think people are, moving into the water, resetting themselves. It's not
Yeah.
the same as a run or a bike, like you said, getting the stroke, feeling the water out, all that stuff, and getting to a place where they're ready to swim. Right. And I think there's especially for age groupers, we can't just turn the swim stroke on. There's a lot of sort of mental input that needs to be there.
Yeah.
And then that second piece you touched on, that easy swimming. Like for me, I think that easy swimming is key, but especially for age groupers, I'm like, that's when we can focus on your stroke. So it's like we talk about good stroke as the process that yields the speed, but there can still be, just like running, you can still run well and run slow and run well and run fast. And I think having the ability to still hold good mechanics at that slower pace, like for me, no one looks really that great when they're sprinting. You slow it down, it doesn't look good. But if you can maintain your form and hold it there, that's a real litmus test. And as athletes get better at increasing the volume and the distance, they can do that type of work. I think what's great about that approach is you're giving a space for athletes to be successful that isn't just something that's determined by the clock, right? Like it's a productive piece of the equation. It's not just the not work time. Like triathletes would probably be like, look, we could just get rid of this 200, rest 5 seconds, and let's just do the fasting again. Like, because I gotta get going, and they're missing out on that whole developmental piece for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like descend sets are exactly kind of this concept I'm talking about. I think people don't do them well. They're like, oh, I'm going to go really easy on the first one so I can go really fast on the last one. And it's like, no, like you set up that stroke in the first one and you just go a little bit faster every time until, and I've done this in the pool where, you do a set of 50s or something that are descent. And this takes some really deliberate practice by the swimmer, but it's like, where did you notice a big kind of decoupling? Right? Like when did you go like half a second faster, but it got way, way harder? Right there. That's where your stroke broke down. So let's go back to the 50 before that and do that one a bunch of times. Right. And so that's, that's kind of a thing that we do a lot. And same kind of thing with implementing stroke count. So you do this like a similar concept where you do, right, the first interval's like number 1 is stroke count, and then number 2 is fast, and repeat. And so you get this back and forth of, refining my stroke. I'm pulling a lot of water, right? Big forearm, and then I'm going to put that into faster swimming. And then I'm going to do it over and over and over again.
Okay.
And so same kind of idea.
Yeah, totally. So I mean, one thing that resonates to me here is this, talking about the minimum effective dose. I think what's neat about what you're building here with this frequency of practice, and then paying attention to different parts of that swim equation, is that you're what seems like a good deal of work now, say in the winter when there's not a lot of training and 2 swims a week seems like a lot. But when you get in season and we're looking at adding more time on the bike, more time on the run, and spending areas out there to be more race specific, the swim is staying fixed. So you've earned the right to not swim a lot later because you've been doing this baseline level of swimming across the board. Yeah. How do you, from a training perspective, how do you capitalize on that? Like as a coach, like does that, when people start doing like the longer workouts and stuff like that, how does that approach really benefit you?
Just a consistent 2 swims a week approach that benefits?
Yeah, right. So like, normally people be like, oh, sorry, now you don't swim 2 times a week, you swim 4 times a week, but you're also biking 4 more hours a week. And, and so people all of a sudden are like, they're running to work. They're doing like push-ups in the cafeteria. They're like, they're just training everywhere, and not getting much out of it.
Yeah. I think, and that's super common. And I just had a conversation with an athlete on this concept of, we're just making small gains all the time. And because he was trying to like overachieve on certain workouts. So workouts where he's running way too fast, and then he's blowing up and not finishing long rides and whatever. And I'm like, so I want you to back this off a little bit. Like we just need to kind of get through these weeks nice and consistently. And so he's like, okay, so he's like, you want me to just kind of back off and just kind of, do what's prescribed, and then we'll ramp it up. And I'm like, no, We're going to just keep doing this.
Right.
And so I think people ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm.
The athlete's perception ebbs and flows, and the training changes also. Right? You've got your hard weeks and your easier weeks, but they're often all over the place. And so I think it just depends. You'll get athletes that like, oh man, that was really hard. Swimming this week was super tough, and I'm tired. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, I'm not swimming enough. I should be swimming 8,000 yards of practice. And so I think kind of reminding them that you're going to have good practices and bad ones. You're going to have good workouts and bad workouts, but keep grinding. And it's always good to kind of see the fruits of our labor. And so, doing some kind of test, doing a race. So I'm a big advocate of doing like short course races before your half or full Ironman. And so those are good, not only as practice to kind of practice your trade and put everything together and do that open water swim and all that kind of stuff. So that's also good to kind of to do. So the athlete is like, oh, okay, like this is working. But yeah, it's just kind of and swimming takes a long time. And a lot of people, I think, find that they have those like breakthroughs.
Right.
With swimming, right? Like I've been swimming for 3 months and nothing's happened. And then all of a sudden I'm swimming 5 seconds, 100 faster today, right?
Right.
And so, but you gotta do the months of grinding to get those. Right? And so you have to just kind of keep at it. And so, so yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily make practices longer or shorter depending on the periodization where people are in the year or whatever. It's more about availability of the pool, and it's about what are they capable of doing.
Right.
And so if you're not capable of swimming 4,000 yards in a practice, then we're not going to do that.
Right.
So but and so we definitely get into it, where in the summer they start getting motivated and they get more fit and they're more capable, and then we go. And that's another thing that I think is key with this 2 swims a week is a lot of triathletes do the swim like after the fact. They like do their long run and then they do a bike ride and then they're like, now I'll just go swim and get this done. And like, look, if you do that all the time, your swimming's going to suck and you're going to suck at swimming. And so almost all the time, the swimming that I prescribe people and the way our practice schedule is lined up is it's fresh. It's the first workout of the day or the only workout of the day. If you're fresh, you're fresher, that means you're more focused. And that means the more focused you are, the better off, the more likely you are to have perfect practice. Right. So, and so we try to do that most of the time also. And so, yeah, I think, people, for people that are like twice a week, I've had swimming coaches and all kinds of people be like, you can't improve on 2 swims a week. It has to be 3. And I'm like, well, I've done it a bunch. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you get into this, hey, it's got to be coached. You got to do it all year round. You got to be really focused and deliberate about it. And it should be your first workout of the day. Like it shouldn't be, after a 2-hour run or whatever. Yeah. Now you're like, oh, wow, this is kind of like you're putting a lot of importance on this swimming all of a sudden. And, that might be the case. So in some ways it sounds like, oh, swimming's not a big deal to Eric. And then other times you look at it a different way and you're like, oh, wow, it is a big deal. Like there's a lot into this. Right. So,
no, I think you're right. Like it's easy. People will often do that, right? They'll just be like, that guy over there, he doesn't care about the swim because he only swims twice a week. And they don't really appreciate, the depth to which you're working through that session and maximizing. And I think you're right. Like swimming to me makes me think a lot about golf, like, or batting, right? Baseball. It's all about the reps. Like you've got to be taking the reps, because nothing drives me nuts more than that point you brought out earlier, which is when someone says, hey, I read this thing online, or I saw a tweet, or I did whatever. And the swimmer she said, touch your knees together. And so I touched my knees together and I was 8 seconds faster. Why didn't you tell me just to put my knees together? I would have been 8 seconds faster years ago. And I'm like, to get to those breakthroughs, right? It takes months, reps, all this stuff to get you in a place where you can understand what that means. And to do that, right? Otherwise, we would all be swimming like Michael Phelps, right? And Katie Ledecky, because all we got to do is just see it and we do it. So I think another hidden value of your approach is you're creating a space for people to get reps. You're doing it socially, so people are fast tracking their learning and they're getting that feedback, also from the coach, but that you're setting them up for success because they're making it happen. So for people who are listening, who are like, this guy's got it. Like, we don't do any swimming. Well, we do more than none. So that's not what it is at all. Like, there's a lot of intentionality in there. Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's so
it's got to be intentional. It's got to be, and you see these people that roll into the gym and they got the workout on the kickboard.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I can just see it in their faces. They're just like it's so intense. And I'm like, number one. And
totally,
this workout you have could be the best workout ever designed. And if you don't do it right, and if someone isn't watching you to help you correct mistakes, then it's not going to work. And you don't have to be the first time I coached swimming, I was subbing. Someone was like, can you sub this class? And I was like, I'm not really a swim coach. And they're like, just, you know how to coach a master's class. So do it. And I was like, okay. And I'm sitting there watching people swim and I'm like, wow, they're doing that wrong. And I've had coaches tell me about that. And now I'm watching other people do it wrong. And it's amazing what you can see when you're just standing there on deck being the critic.
Right.
So you don't need this, like, the most amazing swim coach in the world. You need someone on deck paying attention to you. That can be like, you're doing 5 things wrong, but here's the first thing. So we'll just do one thing at a time, right?
Right.
Let's correct this. Okay, now we'll progress to this. So on and so forth. So
yes.
And so that's why I'm a big advocate of the coaching also.
Awesome.
Somebody on deck,
Awesome. Yeah. I love it. Well, hey, listen, I've got to move on to the rest of my day, but let's consider this like the first installment. We talked about the swim. Maybe we can come back. We can talk a little bit about the bike and the run as well.
Yeah, for sure.
The parts you focus in on, so we get some input.
That'd be great.
I really appreciate your perspective, and it's always helpful for our athletes, our audience, to hear from other experts like yourself in terms of other ways of framing how you approach the sport, and where you place importance. And so the recaps for today are definitely group swimming twice a week, year round, having a coach on deck, someone's gonna be able to give you feedback, making that warm up count for sure. All of that adds up. I'll put all this in the show notes as well as a link to the URL. And let's you and I plan to do another call maybe in a month or so, and we can kind of tackle that next challenge, how you help people get stronger on the bike.